Now, advance to slide 15. Slide 13 shows you all the things that need to be considered, like issues of geography, and is designed to stimulate the client to spell out what kinds of things they're good at. So this particular client is good at writing, drafting, precision working, planning, inventing, and programming. Slide 16. Bolas then follows up these skills with details about skills with the body, skills with materials, skills with objects, and so on and so forth. Slide 17. He continues the exercise, showing that some clients are better at creating or managing or sorting or just putting things to use. Slide 18. He has clients look at whether they prefer to work with individuals one at a time or with groups or organizations. Slide 19. So those are some exercises that one can do, and he has a load of them in his book, which is on your syllabus, with ideas. You ought to try some of them out for yourself and see which might have meaning for a given individual client. A formal assessment is different from this kind of activity, and formal assessment deals with known validity. And perhaps you studied this in your assessment course. If you haven't had the assessment course, or even if you have, I think it's very important to review validity and reliability. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Validity basically means, does the assessment measure what it claims to measure? And there's all different kinds of validity. Face validity means, does the content make sense? So if you're going to give a math test for electricians, the problem should be related to electricity. That's face validity. Content validity represents what the test measures, the actual content, whether it's math or whether it's reading or history or vocational interests, many such things. Criterion validity has two kinds. Concurrent validity relating to current data. Let's say, does the strong interest inventory have any correlation with job success? And does it predict future performance? So criterion validity is concurrent, which relates to something that's going on right now, and predictive validity is something in the future that we're trying to predict. Okay? Construct validity. Does it measure a theoretical construct or trait? So the 16 personality factors inventory tends to measure constructs which are developed based on a statistical technique called factor analysis. And finally, discriminant validity. Does your test, the one you're giving now, measure something different than related tests? So for example, while we often look for high correlations when we're measuring the validity of a test, if we're giving a math test, we don't want it to correlate highly with results of a reading comprehension test, because then you're confusing math knowledge, let's say, with reading comprehension. You want a low correlation between a math test and a reading test. Okay? That's slide 19. We go to slide 20. Formal assessments are also supposed to be reliable. And reliability can mean different things. It can mean, are the answers in the first half of the test, do they correlate with the answers in the second half? But the most common kind of reliability is called test-retest, which means that giving the assessment a second or third time would hopefully correlate highly with the results the first time. One thing I learned from a very good professor at University of Maryland, T.G. Anders, our statistics professor, is that you square the coefficient of reliability or validity to get the percent of variance that's predicted. And let me go back to slide 20. A correlation of 0.4 for validity information is considered rather good. If you square 0.4, what do you get? Well, my math says you get 0.16. So even a highly valid test only predicts 16% of what you're trying to do. So if the SAT correlates 0.4 with college achievement, it means that only 16% of what makes for college achievement is predicted by the SAT. By the way, the SAT correlations are usually lower than 0.4, as far as I know. So you have to be very careful about how you interpret these. The same goes with reliability. A good reliability coefficient is around 0.8 or higher, but if you square 0.8 on a test-retest reliability, you get 0.64. That means only 64% of the results of the second test were predicted by the results of the first test, which means that 36% is unaccounted for. So you can see how imperfect even good tests are, and therefore we need to be very cautious about how we interpret reliability and validity. Let's go to slide 21. Other characteristics that we need for formal assessment have to do with fairness in terms of different cultures. So, does the instrument apply to various cultures? If you're giving an instrument to an African American individual, was it standardized on African Americans? Also, what kind of comparison is there? How does it compare the scores of one individual with those of others? Slide 22. Some of the common interest inventories are listed on the following slides. We'll be talking a little bit more about the Career Occupational Preference Survey. But these are all very good interest inventories. Slide 23. The CUDA Career Search is another one that you can try out, and the links are in your Niles and Harris Bowlesby text. And the ONET Interest Profiler is one that we're going to try out in the lab when we study the internet. Slide 24. Other such instruments include the self-directed search, which you may take in your assessment course, the strong interest inventory, which of course we're taking. And one thing we have to understand is not everybody's capable of reading the items on these interest inventories. So they've come up with other ones like the Reading Free Vocational Interest Inventory or the COPS PIC, which the client compares activities in various pictures and indicates what he or she likes about them. Slide 25. The CUDA Assessment Report, first of all, shows you your top 20 person matches. And that way it's very similar to the strong interest inventory. It compares your likes and dislikes with the likes and dislikes of people in different fields. Slide 26. What's interesting about the Cooter that you don't usually get with other interest inventories is they give you actual career sketches of people who have scored like you. So it might be a high school teacher, as in this sketch. It might be a professor of psychology. These happen to be my profiles that you're looking at based on how I did on the Cooter Career Search. And it kind of gives you a more humanistic result, which I think is something that clients would probably enjoy. Then you've got instruments that measure skills or abilities. And these include the Skill Scan, Work Keys, the O-Net Ability Profiler, slide 29, the CAPS Aptitude, Differential Aptitude Tests. One that I like very much on reading skills is the Nelson-Denny reading test. Slide 30. One of the best measures of aptitudes is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, or ASVAB. And if you click on the links, you can actually go to the ASVAB site and see how that battery is set up. Slide 31. This is one of the things you'll see on the site where they give you a summary of the various kinds of aptitudes measured by the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. Slide 32. Here you get various occupations, and the more checks that you see on the right-hand side, the more likely it is that you have the aptitude patterns to fit the various aspects of those occupations. Other inventories include the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, which is a very, very popular personality test that's used in career planning. And the face validity is very high, but the actual reliability and validity is rather poor. You can just change your responses to a couple of items and you end up with scores on the opposite end of what you originally came up with. The O-Net Work Importance Provider is a values test like the ones that we've taken, and you'll be able to take that on the internet when we go to the lab. The COPES is part of the CAPS-COPES system and measures work values. And the 16 personality factors test can also give you ideas as to whether the person is emotionally stable, but also whether they tend to like to be with people or prefer to work alone, and various other factors like that. We'll be going over some of that. One of the gripes with intelligence testing has been that many tests shortchange black individuals. So the Black Intelligence Scale of Cultural Homogeneity, or the BITCH test, was developed for items that are culturally familiar to blacks and apparently not so much to white students. Blacks score much higher on these items, and one of the sample items for vocabulary is define deuce and a quarter. And before you look at slide 35, try to see if you know the answer to that. Slide 35 gives the answer. When this test was developed, the Buick Electra 225 was a very popular car among blacks, and almost every black person knew what a deuce and a quarter was. When you're selecting an instrument, you have to do a lot of thinking. You got to think about purpose. What are the characteristics of those you're assessing? Does the norm group fit the individual that you're working with? And is the instrument reliable and valid. You need to read reviews, and there's a link to a good review book under the recommended books in your syllabus. One of the big things I always ask people to do is never administer a test unless you've taken it. And of course, read the publisher's materials. And practice with a few individuals. And practice interpretation. Determine the costs and options for administration and scoring.